welcome and shalom here from Jerusalem at this week's webinar. I'm Nick Hansen and I am the National Director for ICEJ-Denmark, and I'm standing in on behalf of our Vice President and Senior Spokesperson David Parsons this week. Before I introduce our distinguished guest today, here's a brief but essential update from the heart of Israel. Now, first, the discourse around genocide accusations is continually reverberating globally, especially after the remarks by Spain's Prime Minister labeling Israel's action in Gaza as a genocide. A claim Israel, of course, strongly denies and sees as highly politicized. Now, next, the momentum for building towards a unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state continues to go on. Countries like Australia, France, the UK, Canada, Malta, and many more nations are preparing to make a formal declaration at the upcoming UN General Assembly that will peak on the 23rd of September. It already has started. The talks have already begun. And speaking of the UN General Assembly coming up here in September, it is shaping to be quite pivotal at this moment, both in the recognition and the broader diplomacy that goes on in the whole talks on Israel and Palestine. And this will have major ramifications. Now, finally, let me just say that on this Monday, there was a brutal terror attack in Jerusalem at the Ramat Junction, where six civilians lost their lives and more than 20 people got injured. Now, the assassins got dealt with, but at the same time we saw from inside Gaza 4 soldiers got killed in battle. So on this backdrop, which is quite dark, we have a very crucial and important talk today that I hope will be good for you and edifying right here from the heart of Jerusalem. So with all this in mind, let me introduce the well-known, liked guest that we have on today to really take us through the tumultuous times and developments that is going on. It is Mark Regev, former ambassador of Israel to the United Kingdom, where he served from 16 to 20. And also before that was the Prime Minister's chief spokesperson. Before that, and in that he became a very well-known face in the global media. Born in Australia, educated in Melbourne, has served in many capitals around the world, from Beijing to Washington, and has been very instrumental in all the many crucial crises that has been over the last couple of decades. So today, Mark is continuing his work out of the Institute for Diplomacy and Foreign Relations at the Reichman University, shaping the diplomatic education and strategy right here in the heart of Israel. And so we are so very privileged to welcome him to the conversation for a depth and clarity in all the things that is going on right now. So Mark, shalom and welcome to this call, and thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Nick, it's a pleasure to be with you and with the viewers of this program.
Now, you previously talked on our webinar, and you know a little bit of who we are, and it's maybe in a different capacity that you now speak. Where you formerly had one title, you now have a different title. So maybe you are freer to speak your mind and call things like you see it, and we just hope that you'll be able to really clear things up for us. But before we go into the depth of the matter, I introduced you for the formal side, what you do, what you've done, and whatnot. But you're also just the man, Mark, the father, Mark, and you're an Israeli. How is Israel doing right now?
Well, this week, in many ways, for many of us, represented the dichotomy of being an Israeli today. Because as you said in your introduction, Nick, you said that we had very bad news earlier in the week. We had 4 young soldiers who were killed in combat in Gaza. One of them lives in my community in the Modi'in, the city of Modi'in, which is between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And it's very sad. These young men are the best of the best. They're volunteering in combat units. They could have easily, had they wanted to, secured some sort of desk job somewhere out of harm's way, maybe doing important work, but not putting their life in the line. And one has to have the greatest respect and sorrow that they unfortunately fell in battle. Every time I see the pictures of those young men, it moves me. Yes, you cannot. I don't think any Israeli is not touched deeply by the sacrifice of these brave young men. And that was immediately followed by, as you also said, the terrorist attack in Jerusalem in Ramot, where 6 people, civilians, were mowed down by Palestinian terrorists. Very sad. 6 people, I believe it was 5 men and 1 woman. Very sad. And we all saw their pictures and their names all over the news, and the video from the funerals was broadcast on television. A very, very sad 2 days. And then later in the week, we hit back against Hamas. Hamas, of course, was responsible for the soldiers. It was Hamas's terrorists in Gaza, and it was, of course, Hamas took responsibility for the attack in Jerusalem. And hitting back against the Hamas leadership in Doha was in any way, so this is Israeli planes fly all the way to the Gulf. They successfully hit a target. It's not clear yet that we eliminated all those we wanted to eliminate. But the very fact that we're saying to the Hamas leadership, we don't matter where you are, we will find you. If you are responsible for the murder of Israelis, for the murder of Jews, we will find you, and justice will be done. Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I no longer work for him, I no longer speak for the government officially in an official capacity, yes? But I think he said something that, at least it spoke to me personally, because my father was a Holocaust survivor. My father was born in Magdeburg, Germany in 1931, and he went through the war years, and it was not easy for him or for his family. And Netanyahu said, and it spoke, as I said, it spoke to me. He said, there was a time when the people who hated the Jewish people could target us with impunity. And all the Jews could do was try to run and hide or beg someone to protect them. Today, since 1948, Israel is a sovereign, independent, and thankfully, a strong state that can defend its people and its citizens. And though the threats are still there, and we saw those threats with the deaths of the 4 soldiers and the civilians who were murdered on the streets of Jerusalem, yes? But today we have the ability to defend ourselves. And the strike in Qatar showed that. And I'd like everyone who wishes us evil, yes, who wishes to hurt us, to know, yes, we will protect ourselves, and those responsible for the murder of Jewish people, in the end, we will find you, and we will bring you to justice.
Wow, thank you. Let's go right into the thick of some of the big issues that really sets the political stage, the media stage, all across the world, and maybe it's viewed somewhat different in Israel than it is in the rest of the world. So let's get into how you see things from Israel, looking out to what is going on, and let's go right into this whole genocide accusation that is going on. Israel is being accused of committing a genocide in Gaza. Accusations widely dismissed as activism, even by the UK government in this week. They had a pushback on it, and it is simply not vigorous academic scrutiny that has been going on. And how do you view this narrative that seems to be reverberating again and again and again? Even though it gets dismissed, then it pops up and shows its ugly face again and again. And what are the damages that it can have, not just for Israel's reputation and brand, but also for Israelis or Jews, for that matter, across the world?
So I think it's important to see this in historic terms, Nick. There was a time when the Jewish people were accused of all sorts of crimes, yes? Today you'd call it crimes against humanity. We were accused of spreading the Black Death, of spreading the plague. We were accused of murdering innocent little children, Christian children, to steal their blood for some sort of sacrifice. Yes, there were all these terrible myths, charges, libels posed against the Jews. And this genocide charge against the Jewish state, I'm afraid it's reminiscent of this sort of irrational hatred. It has no basis. Now, what is true? In the fighting in Gaza, very difficult fighting, there have been civilians caught up in the crossfire. And there have been civilians who've unfortunately been killed. And to be frank, that's not a good thing, but I don't think there's been a war any time which hasn't seen what the experts call collateral damage. Unfortunately, it is inevitable. It is the job of democratic governments to try to limit that collateral damage, but to limit it totally to is impossible. You can't fight a war without it, especially in the case of Gaza, where you are fighting a brutal terrorist enemy that deliberately uses the Gaza civilian population as a human shield. Yes, when we ask people to vacate a combat area for their own safety, so they're out of harm's way, Hamas forces them to stay. Yes, it can be very, very difficult sometimes, and the Israeli army faces very difficult choices sometimes. If you compare us to perfection, of course we fall short. Mistakes are made, and it's not good. If you compare us to other Western democratic countries who've had to fight wars, especially in built-up urban areas against ruthless terrorist enemies, like the West did against ISIS, let's say in Syria and in Iraq. If you compare then the ratio between civilian casualties and combatant casualties, actually Israel's behavior in Gaza actually compares very well. Once again, I'm not talking about the Russians or the Chinese, I'm talking about democratic countries fighting a war against terrorism. And this charge of genocide, the whole idea that we are deliberately trying to massacre a people, it's absurd. It's wrong. It really is a libel. We are trying to limit collateral damage. We don't want to see innocent people caught up in the crossfire.
So when ICEJ comes with an accusation like this, and it's taken down as the leading experts in genocide, and it's, media are picking it up, sharing it. It's rebutted. There's a pushback, and it is evident. But the harm has been done. At least to me, it seems like it's a weaponizing of international law. But is that also how you view the thing that is going on in this type of narrative?
I do view it as the weaponization of what is supposed to be international law. And I'd ask you the following question, Nick. On October 7th, 2023, we know that 1,200 people were killed by the Hamas terrorists, okay? If they had the capability, Nick, would they have killed, instead of 1,200, would they have killed 12,000? What's the answer? The answer is yes. So let's go further. Let's add another zero. If they could have, would they have killed 120,000 people? If they had the capability, would they do it? The answer is yes. If they could kill 1 million Israelis, 1 million Jews, would they have done it? And the answer is yes. That's what Hamas is all about. So who is the genocidal organization? I think it was the former German chancellor who visited us during the first weeks of the war. He made a comparison between Hamas and the Nazis. I think he said they were like the new Nazis. I remember he made the comparison. And yet Israel, which is a democratic society, trying to defend itself, trying to limit collateral damage, but to win the war, we must win the war. There's no substitute for victory. But the charge really is, I think, not only offensive, but it's downright wrong.
Okay. I've heard you say in previous interviews that the two-state solution is an illusion, simply because it's not doable from either side. And in the light of what we see right now with the talks and with the whole narrative of genocide, are we coming any way further in that whole discussion?
Listen, I think we have to focus on winning the war, and then we have to focus on winning the peace. We know that across the Arab world, there is a growing understanding that Israel can be a good ally and a good friend. And when Israel fights Hamas, many Arab governments are quietly wanting to see us win. Because for them, Hamas represents this extreme form of Islam that is, the same ideology that motivates their own internal terrorists and internal opposition. They see Hamas as a part of the Iranian camp and so forth. And though they may not say it publicly, many Arab countries want to see Israel win this. When we struck against Qatar, we didn't strike in Qatar, we struck against Hamas in Qatar. All the Arab governments were condemning, of course, publicly, but I think privately, many of them think this Israel is strong. Israel is defending itself. Israel is taking on our enemies too. And so I believe that when the fighting dies down in Gaza and we have won, I think there will be an explosion of peace. And I believe it's possible to move forward with Arab governments. I know President Trump in Washington wants to see the expansion of the Abraham Accords. I believe it's possible to move forward. I think it's in the Arab interest. I think it's in Israel's interest. And I am optimistic about the future. And I'll even say something about Palestinians, if you'll allow me. You're 100% correct, Nick, when you say that there's no chance for any sort of final peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. And if Europeans will say, well, that's where you have to put the effort, I say it's a wasted effort. Let's try to, first of all, make a ceasefire and make a stable ceasefire. But the idea of a peace treaty or something like that, it's just not on the cards. You're wasting your time. But where the effort, the political effort should be, after achieving a ceasefire in Gaza, the political effort should be on expanding peace in the Middle East. And Israel, as Israel makes peace and normalization with more and more Arab countries, I believe in the medium term, in the longer term, the Palestinians, who are an integral part of the Arab world, they will jump on the bandwagon of peace too. That they'll see that when all their Arab brothers and sisters are making peace with Israel and benefiting from having a good relationship with Israel, that will ultimately, I hope, one day, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but in the medium and longer term, this can affect Palestinians too. And I would suggest to those Europeans who want to see peace in the Middle East, the opportunity is there. Seize it. Encourage Israeli-Arab reconciliation. And that will, as I say, affect the Palestinians as well in the longer term. But if you say, make peace with the Palestinians, that's the only thing that you can do. No, the most important thing is to make a ceasefire, end the war, defeat Hamas. That's good for Israel, that's good for Palestinians. But the whole idea of some two-state solution being there ready for tomorrow, that's a myth, and it's a waste of political energy, and it's diverting energy where it really should be, which is in expanding the Abraham Accords.
Great. So let me just ask a question in this regard, because as we're coming up to the UN General Assembly, think of what you might. There is this push for a two-state solution, a recognition of a Palestinian state. I hear you say, well, that's not the way to go about it. But, you know, there has been a war going on now for 706 days today, as we are talking, you and I. And then we see the Western nation, we see it led by Macron in France, pushing for this unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. So why do you think the governments in the West thinks this is a good idea to do it this way instead of doing what you say?
So I think they're not involved in what's going on. They are in many ways bystanders. If there's a ceasefire in Gaza or not, if there's a release of our hostages or not, it all now depends on the American track. And as you know, the American is working through Arab mediators. But the Europeans, I hope I'm not offending their governments, yes, but the European governments are largely, if not totally, irrelevant in this process. You would think, Nick, that they would be supporting the Americans and the Arab mediation to try to get a ceasefire that sticks, a release of hostages, an end of Hamas rule in Gaza, this sort of package, which is being worked on. Instead of doing so, maybe because they have to, it's like a little child crying for attention. I hope I'm not overspeaking, but I'm no longer working for the government. And as you said, I can speak what I think, yes? Maybe like people who are irrelevant, who are striving to appear relevant, yes? So they're doing things, but unfortunately, when they're doing these things, I believe they're undermining the real effort for a ceasefire, hostage release, end of war, and end of Hamas control of Gaza. I'll give you an example. Hamas is losing this war, unequivocally, yes? What is Hamas holding out for? That Israel will be forced to stop the fighting without achieving our victory. And they think international pressure on Israel will steal victory from us, because militarily, of course, we're going to win. It might take a bit longer, but we're going to win. And Hamas will be removed from power in Gaza. But if they think international pressure is going to stop Israel from achieving this military victory and leave them in power in Gaza, and that pressure is the calls from the same European governments who are calling for a Palestinian, to recognize the Palestinians, have also called for a ceasefire. They just don't finish the sentence, because to many people, to many good people, you say ceasefire, they think, oh, that's good, end the bloodshed. But if you have a ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power, that's a temporary Band-Aid solution, and we'll have another October 7th, just further down the line. A ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power is no ceasefire, and we cannot agree to that.
I understand fully what you're saying there, but Macron is an intelligent man. He has one of the best intelligence services in the world, maybe not as good as Israeli and American, but it's pretty good. Why would he then, seeing what you're seeing too, say, no, let's go the other way?
So I can't answer the question. I don't know. I don't know what's in the French policy. There could be all sorts of reasons for doing it, both domestic political reasons in France and international reasons to distinguish themselves from the Americans.
Is that the case? This is about distinguishing ourselves from America. This is actually an issue with Trump. We want to, as European nations, and I am European myself, come from a European country. Is it because we have a beef with President Trump and he is giving full go-ahead and green light to Israel to do what they need to do in order to end this war? And Europe is, we don't know what to do, so let's oppose America, let's oppose Donald Trump by coming against Israel. Is that how you view it?
You do have this popular anti-Americanism in Europe. It's not new. It's been there for ages. Europe cannot forgive the United States for saving it in 2 world wars. Yes, this is a European, and countries like Canada and Australia, the way they express their national identity sometimes is by being anti-American.
Yeah.
Israel is very interesting because we've been helped by the Americans over the years, and yet we're not anti-American. It's a strange phenomenon. Yes. But that's part of it. Part of it is the internal politics in this country, in those countries, yes, domestic political considerations. For some reason, for people on the radical left, the Palestine cause has become the Holy Grail, yes? The Palestinians have become almost a mystical, they are the whole representation of oppression, and in all the bad things about the world are seen through the Palestinian lens. Yes, you see it in these people who are coming to Gaza in their strange flotilla, yes, so-called to bring aid, which it's just a show, yes. But then these constituencies affect more mainstream parties of the center-left because they have a very strong anti-Israel constituency inside their more mainstream party, and so it plays for different reasons, but the reasons don't concern me. What concerns me is the outcome. And if people want to see a ceasefire in Gaza, the hostages come back, a political solution that leaves Hamas out of power, they are doing the opposite. But by saying ceasefire, by saying recognize a Palestinian state, they might think they're helping, I don't know, but they're in fact undermining the real efforts to create a better future.
Let me just, maybe you have an insight, because being a diplomat, working in the field that you've done for many years, you know the ins and outs of how the European nations are thinking and how the Americans are thinking in relationship to Israel, of course. And so it baffles me that it seems that the nativity in Europe is so stunning that recognizing a Palestinian state actually makes it worse. It is a short-term solution. It will not help the people in a real manner, yet there's still this push for it. Now, I will say, though, that my own government in Denmark has now by three times said we cannot reconcile ourselves with the idea and supporting the idea of a Palestinian state. What's the border? Who's the leader? What's the diplomatic situation that will go? What will be the currency? What will be all these things that needs to be set up in advance for this to actually be a viable thing? So there is at least one partner who sees it for other than just political purposes. Yet there is this push on our politicians to also recognize a Palestinian state at this moment. So how would a diplomat, how would someone like you in the Israeli government navigate those types of narratives and logics that are at play?
So first of all, I have to stress I'm no longer in the Israeli government. I'm giving you my private opinion now as an academic, as a former ambassador, not as a current one representing the current government of Israel. I would say the following. In 2012, maybe you remember, Nick, the UN General Assembly recognized Palestine as a state. And there was a big celebration at the UN in New York, and a party was held in Ramallah. The UN has accepted Palestine as a state. And Palestinians in Gaza, many of the leadership, celebrated this, and they had, as I say, a big party. And in the morning they woke up, and maybe some of them had a hangover, I don't know, but they woke up and nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. In other words, this recognition of Palestinian statehood, it doesn't change anything on the ground. It doesn't change reality. It's the politics of theater. It's virtual signaling, they call it today, yes? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring peace closer, on the contrary. It makes peace further difficult to achieve. Why? First of all, there is no Palestinian state, but if the Palestinians can achieve recognition of a state, of a virtual state, yes, by the international community without ever having to compromise, why would they compromise if they can get recognition without compromise? And here it has to be said, the government of the Palestinian Authority, yes, the people that Macron wants to recognize as a state, yes, has he placed any preconditions on them? Do they have to renounce terrorism and stop funding terrorism? As you know, pay for slay. They pay money to people guilty of the most heinous crimes. Those are people who committed the murders in Jerusalem earlier this week. Had they survived and been brought to jail and tried and been sentenced to prison, they would receive a pension, a special pension, from the Palestinian Authority to fund them. And now that they are martyrs in the eyes of the Palestinian Authority, their families receive money. And so there are economic incentives by the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank, not by Hamas, for people to commit these terrible, these terrible crimes. The Palestinian Authority today has been very reticent to publicly condemn October 7th. You think they could say, that's Hamas, that's not us? They could condemn it? No, they've refused to do so. They've refused, until today, to recognize the legitimacy of the Jewish state. When they say two-state solution, they say one state for Palestine and one state for the other lot, but they never say the Jewish people have a right to a state of their own. They're very careful never to say that. And so if Mr. Macron, President Macron, had placed conditions, but no, they get French recognition of a Palestinian state when there's no state, and when it does the opposite to support peace, because the Palestinians don't have to moderate any of their hardline positions. There's no political logic.
So following the logic that you just presented here now, Macron, he knows all this, and he knows that he has not put any conditions on them that he should have had. So is he also making a sham out of those that he wants to recognize? Is this just political rhetoric? And so the whole thing that will go on, the assembly coming up in the UN, is that just a recognition of what we've already recognized? So this is just one more theatrical show that goes on that really will not have any effect at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. I said before, it's the politics of theater. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't help advance peace either. Some of these Europeans think this is somehow going to help peace. No. What will help peace is get that ceasefire in Gaza, have a new political arrangement in Gaza where it's no longer Hamas running the show. Hamas is demilitarized. I'm sorry, Gaza is demilitarized, yes? Look, Lebanon today, Lebanon used to be the success story of the Arab world. Beirut was called the Paris of the Middle East. And because of Hezbollah and Syria and Iran, Lebanon became a failed state. Lebanon now has a chance to succeed. They really do have a very good chance, and we're going to help them where we can. The Americans, the French, everyone wants to see Lebanon reestablish its sovereignty instead of being a failed state to be a successful state. Gaza has an opportunity now. Get rid of Hamas, put in a leadership, establish a leadership there, with the help of Arab governments and other Western governments, help establish a more moderate, pragmatic regime that actually cares about the people of Gaza, yes, and doesn't sacrifice the population of Gaza on the altar of some crazy jihad against Israel, yes. Give the people of Gaza an opportunity to build and to have a normal life. And that can only be done without Hamas, because as long as Hamas runs Gaza, Israel will be under threat, and the people of Gaza will live under this theocratic tyranny. And I'm afraid too many people in Europe just get the story wrong.
I think that you're absolutely right. So leading up to this whole UN thing, we see so much build-up around it. But looking back on what has gone on at these assemblies prior, I've been looking at Benjamin Netanyahu and what he has been trying to communicate. And it seems to me that he is increasingly using biblical language to explain in the UN what is going on. Like the last time when he warns against the blessed and the cursed nations. And you see how he is using that type of communication. So do you think that is in order to actually communicate to the Arab world, who has at least some reference and deference and honor for the scripture and also the Torah to some extent, and maybe also the Christian nations who might understand biblical imagery? Or is this actually rhetoric from a man who's running out of options? How do you see his way of communicating at the moment?
No, I worked with Netanyahu for 10 years, and there's no doubt that he has a very strong connection to the Jewish heritage, to the Jewish history. His father was a very famous historian who studied the Jews in Spain during the medieval period. And he grew up in that house, yes, and he knows the history, he knows the past, he knows the Bible, he knows the Jewish story from antiquity until today. And so when he uses that imagery, it's part of him as well. You talk about the Arab countries, Israel is projected around the world as, we are artificial interlocutors. We came from somewhere else, yes? They forget that the word Jew actually comes from the word Judeans. People who came from Judea were Jews. That's where the word comes from. And even from a Muslim perspective, in the Quran, the holy book of Muslims, there's talk about Muhammad dealing and sometimes fighting with Jewish tribes here in the Middle East. Hello? Jewish tribes here in the Middle East? What does that say? What does the holy book of Islam say? Jews were here. We predate Islam. Who are these Jews that Muhammad was talking to and sometimes fighting with? Yes, the whole idea that we are some sort of unnatural foreign implant in the region. No, we have roots in this soil going back thousands of years. To deny the Jewish connection to the land is to deny reality. It is to deny history. It is to deny logic. It is to deny elementary truth. And I think when Netanyahu is using those biblical references, he wants to remind people, yes? Because there's a myth out there. It's a very comfortable myth. It says that the Jews suffered in Europe terribly, and Europe solved its Jewish problem, so to speak, by giving them a country that didn't belong to them. Not true. Just not true. Zionism starts well before the Holocaust, and the idea of a Jewish national rebirth is something that is rooted in our tradition, in our heritage. And I think it's important sometimes to remind people of the history because they forget it. A lot of the people, I think the anti-Israelism that you see across the West, in Europe and so forth, a lot of it's based on people not knowing their history. They get their education from TikTok. Yes, well, if I got my education from TikTok, I could well be anti-Israel too. And of course, they don't know basic things. Yes, do you think these people who protest Israel, they know that in 1937 the British put on the table a solution for a two-state solution that gave the Arab side the overwhelming majority of the territory? And the Palestinian leadership at the time said, no, we don't agree even to a smaller Jewish state. And then in 1947, there was another partition proposal put on the table by the United Nations. And once again, the Jewish side accepts it, celebrates it. The Arab side says no. They say, we are willing to give up on a Palestinian Arab state if it means accepting a Jewish state, because we will never accept a Jewish state. Do these people who are progressive know that the Palestinian leadership in the Second World War were open Nazi collaborators? It's in all the history books. The leader of the Palestinians, who later, after the war, is elected the head of the All-Palestine government in Gaza, it was called, the All-Palestine government. He was indicted by the Nuremberg war crime for a collaboration. But these progressives somehow think the Palestinians are liberals, they're left wing. It's an abuse of history.
You're absolutely right. And looking at history, there is no doubt that this area we are in, called Israel, was, and will forever be belonging to the Jewish people. And even the Quran speaks of Israel. It never ever, not even once, mentions Palestine. It only mentions Israel. So even within the Islamic tradition, there is room for an Israel, and so it's so evident. Now, time is flying, and I just have a few things I like to address before we come to a closure. Being at the Reichman University, which is some seen as a very centrist university, not hard left-liner or right-leaning, you then have a chance to meet a lot of young Israelis. Some have left their studies because they had to go into the war. Some returned changed, some didn't return. But you have maybe a better take on what the youth is thinking and seeing at the moment in Israel. So what do you think that, how is the young generation looking at both the process of the war that is going on right now, but also the identity that they carry as an Israeli state?
So if anything gives me confidence for the future, it's my dealings with young Israelis, okay? They are patriotic. They are committed to their country. They do their reserve service. They do their reserve service again, and they do it again. I think my daughter has done over 300 days of reserve service since the war broke out. Yes? And she's not unusual. She represents a generation. They were on holiday in India with a backpack, or they were sailing down some river in Holland, yes? They raced back to Israel to join their units because the country was in danger. And obviously, yes, they've got their lives outside the army. Obviously, they want to have families and a future, and they want to work on their professional careers. But when the country needed them, they were there, and they're still there. And this young generation of Israelis, before the war, they were sometimes dismissed as the TikTok generation, yes? It's, very, very shallow and very only obsessed with themselves and immediate pleasure, yes, and going out to a restaurant and going out to a bar. No, this young generation of Israelis gives us pride, and I think gives us hope that this country will continue to succeed. This country will overcome all the challenges that are faced in front of us, and Israel will continue to be an amazing success story.
What does this speak to the next generation leadership of Israel because some of them are also really, they've gone through hell and are marked maybe for life, what they've been through. But what does this instill in you, and what view do you hope, or hopes maybe, for the future do you have when you look at the young generation?
So I think this young generation will move into the leadership as is only natural in a democratic country. And I'm very optimistic about Israel's future. The 21st century is the century of technology. And Israel, as you know, Nick, is a technological leader on the planet. We are perfectly positioned to succeed in the 21st century. So this country will be increasingly affluent. This country will be increasingly powerful. This country will be increasingly relevant to the international global markets. This country has our roots, our feet are rooted in our heritage, yes? But we look forward, we don't look backwards. And Israel is embracing the modern world. And I think this country will go from strength to strength. I think it's a difficult time for us now with this war, but this war will be won, and then Israel will get on doing what we are best at doing. We passed recently 10 million Israelis, right? When this country was established in May 1948, what were we, 500,000 Israelis, 600,000 Israelis? We are growing demographically. And if you'll allow me just to finish on a lighter point, why is it that every year the UN Happiness Index gives Israel such a high rating? The UN is not known for saying nice, positive things about Israel, but nevertheless, the UN, after the Scandinavian countries, Israel is always right there at the very, very top. What are we doing right in Israel that even the UN has to say? And so I think the answer is, we have a sense of community, we have a sense of purpose, we have a sense of vitality, and that goes together with being a democracy, with a pluralist society, with freedom. In many Western societies, maybe family is less strong. Maybe there's this sense, not a sense of community. In Israel, we take the good things from the modern world, but we keep from our tradition the things that maybe makes Israel special. And you see that in our birth rate. You see that Israelis, in many places of Europe, you've got a negative birth rate, yes? Israel, no. Israel, we believe in the family and children and so forth. And every time, families grow in Israel, it's a vote for the future. It's a belief in the future.
Fantastic, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you so much for setting time aside to address our audience and share your wisdom, knowledge, and insight in what is going on. So we are coming to a conclusion of this week's webinar here at the ICEJ. We hope that you will join in next week at 3 o'clock Israeli time from the heart of Jerusalem. But let me just remind you that in just a few weeks from now, we are celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles right out of Jerusalem, going into the Holy Land and coming in from all over the world. 100 nations plus will join us in, and if you have the opportunity to come and be a part of it, please join us. Or if you can't, you can always join us online. Go to our website for more knowledge at ICEJ.org. And if you like this show that we had for you today and you are watching it on YouTube, give us a like and remember to subscribe. Thank you so much for this week, and we'll be back in just a week from now.
Thank you for joining us today. Join us again next Thursday at 3 p.m. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on our social media platforms for more exclusive ICEJ content.
Join us at the feast.
Приходите в фест Summit Ons.
Присоединяйтесь к нам на праздники Кущи.
让我们一起来欢庆祝棚。
Bienvenidos a la fiesta de los tabernáculos.
Venha a juntar-se conosco para celebrar a festa dos tabernáculos.
Bli med oss på løvefasten.
Tara na at makisama sa kapistahan!
Allemaal mee aan het Loofhuttenfeest.
Rejoignez-nous à la fête.
Et vous serez bénis.
เชิญมาร่วมเทศกาลอยู่เพลิงกับเราค่ะ
The ICEJ store has everything you need to bring a special reminder of Israel home with you. Every order above $10 US, you get a free shower gel. From Feast merch, a wide selection of books and exquisite collection of biblical souvenirs and treasures from the heart of Israel. Go to ICEJstore.com and get your resources today. Follow ICEJ Official on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel for webinar recordings and more videos from Israel. Do join in prayer at 4:30 p.m. daily.